Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, later known to the world as Lenin, was born in Simbirsk, Russia in 1870. His family enjoyed a comfortable life, his father being a respected school inspector. This privileged upbringing, however, would be starkly contrasted by the political awakening that awaited young Vladimir. The execution of his older brother Alexander in 1887 for his involvement in a plot to assassinate Tsar Alexander III had a profound impact on Lenin. The event instilled in him a deep resentment for the Tsarist autocracy and sowed the seeds of revolution in his young mind. The loss of his brother, a beloved figure in Lenin's life, transformed his grief into a burning desire for justice and radical change. This event marked a turning point, pushing him towards the burgeoning revolutionary circles operating in the shadows of Tsarist Russia. It was within these circles that Lenin would discover the writings of Karl Marx and find an ideology that resonated deeply with his own burgeoning revolutionary fervor. Lenin's intellectual journey led him to embrace Marxism, a socio-economic theory that provided a scathing critique of capitalism and championed the cause of the working class. Karl Marx's analysis of history as a class struggle and his prediction of capitalism's inevitable overthrow by the proletariat deeply resonated with Lenin's own observations of social injustice in Russia. He became convinced that only a socialist revolution could liberate the masses from the shackles of oppression and exploitation. Lenin immersed himself in Marxist literature, devouring the works of Marx and his collaborator Friedrich Engels. He organized clandestine study groups, engaging in fervent discussions about revolutionary theory and strategy. Lenin, however, wasn't content with merely interpreting Marx. He sought to apply and adapt Marxist principles to the specific conditions of Russia, a vast and largely agrarian society quite different from the industrialized West that Marx had analyzed. Lenin's unwavering commitment to revolutionary change led him to join the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party, or RSDLP, a party riven by internal divisions. Within the RSDLP, a debate raged between the Mensheviks, who favored a gradual path to socialism through democratic reforms, and the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, who advocated for a swift and decisive seizure of power by the working class. The 1903 Second Congress of the RSDLP witnessed a definitive split between these factions, with Lenin emerging as the leader of the newly formed Bolshevik Party. The split between the Bolsheviks and Mensheviks was not merely a difference in tactics, it reflected fundamentally different interpretations of Marxist theory and revolutionary strategy. Lenin believed that a disciplined vanguard party was necessary to guide the proletariat, which he argued was not yet fully capable of leading a revolution on its own. His views, however, were met with strong opposition from the Mensheviks, who feared that Lenin's vision of a vanguard party would lead to a dictatorship rather than a true dictatorship of the proletariat. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 plunged Russia into chaos and exposed the weaknesses of the Tsarist regime. The war effort proved disastrous, leading to widespread suffering and discontent among the population. Seizing this opportunity, Lenin, who had been in exile, returned to Russia in 1917 with the help of Germany, which saw him as a disruptive force that could hasten Russia's exit from the war. Under Lenin's leadership, the Bolsheviks capitalized on the growing unrest, promising peace, land and bread to a war-weary and impoverished populace. In October 1917, November according to the Gregorian calendar, the Bolsheviks, led by Leon Trotsky's Military Revolutionary Committee, launched a daring coup, seizing key government buildings and communication centers in Petrograd, formerly St. Petersburg. The provisional government, established after the Tsar's abdication earlier that year, proved incapable of resisting the Bolshevik assault and quickly collapsed. The October Revolution, as it came to be known, marked a pivotal moment in world history, ushering in the first communist state and sending shockwaves across the globe. Section 5. Forging a new order, the dictatorship of the proletariat. With the Bolsheviks in power, Lenin set about constructing a new social and political order based on Marxist-Leninist principles. Central to this vision was the concept of the dictatorship of the proletariat, a temporary state of affairs according to Lenin. in which the working class would hold absolute power to suppress counter-revolutionary forces and build a socialist society. Private property was abolished, and industries were nationalized, bringing the means of production under state control. Lenin's vision of a socialist utopia, however, was soon confronted with the realities of governing a vast and diverse nation. The Bolsheviks faced opposition from various quarters, including remnants of the old Tsarist regime, disgruntled peasants angered by forced grain requisitioning, and even rival socialist factions. The outbreak of a brutal civil war in 1918, pitting the Red Army against the White Army, further complicated the task of consolidating Bolshevik rule and building a new society. Section 6, the Red Terror instrument of fear, tool of consolidation. Faced with internal and external threats, the Bolshevik regime unleashed a campaign of repression known as the Red Terror. This systematic use of violence and intimidation targeted perceived enemies of the revolution, including members of the former aristocracy, clergy, and anyone suspected of counter-revolutionary activities. The Cheka, the Bolshevik secret police, wielded immense power, carrying out arbitrary arrests, executions, and imprisonments. The Red Terror, while undoubtedly a brutal chapter in Soviet history, must be understood in the context of the times. The Bolsheviks were fighting for their survival against a multitude of enemies, both internal and external, and they believed that extreme measures were necessary to safeguard the revolution. The terror, however, claimed the lives of countless innocent people and created a climate of fear and paranoia that would cast a long shadow over the early Soviet state. Section 7. A tactical retreat, the new economic policy. By 1921, the Russian economy lay in ruins after years of war and upheaval. The Bolsheviks' initial attempts to implement a fully socialist economy, characterized by centralized planning and the abolition of private trade, had proven disastrous, leading to widespread famine and economic collapse. Facing a dire situation, Lenin announced the New Economic Policy, or NEP, in 1921, a significant departure from his earlier policies. The NEP represented a strategic retreat from pure communism, allowing for a limited revival of private enterprise and market forces. Peasants were allowed to sell their surplus produce on the open market, and small businesses were permitted to operate. The state, however, retained control over key industries, such as banking, heavy industry, and foreign trade. The NEP, while ideologically unpalatable to some hardliners within the Bolshevik Party, proved remarkably successful in reviving the devastated Russian economy and restoring agricultural production. Section 8, the twilight years, illness and the struggle for succession. Lenin's health, which had always been fragile, began to deteriorate rapidly in 1922. He suffered a series of strokes that left him increasingly incapacitated and unable to play an active role in governing the Soviet Union. As Lenin's health declined, a power struggle erupted within the Bolshevik Party, with various factions vying for control of the future of the Soviet state. The main contenders were Leon Trotsky, the charismatic leader of the Red Army, and Joseph Stalin, the shrewd and ruthless General Secretary of the Communist Party. Trotsky, a brilliant orator and military strategist, enjoyed considerable popularity and was seen by many as Lenin's natural successor. However, Stalin, a master of political maneuvering, had been quietly consolidating his power base within the party apparatus. He skillfully exploited his position to place his supporters in key positions of authority, outmaneuvering his rivals and gradually isolating Trotsky. Lenin, aware of the growing tensions within the party and deeply concerned about Stalin's ruthlessness and lust for power, dictated a document known as Lenin's Testament, in which he criticized Stalin's methods and urged the party to remove him from his position as General Secretary. Section 9, Lenin's enduring legacy, a controversial bequest. Lenin's death in 1924 marked the end of an era. He left behind a complex and contradictory legacy, one that continues to be debated and reinterpreted to this day. On the one hand, he was a visionary revolutionary who overthrew a centuries-old autocracy and laid the foundations for a new social order based on the principles of equality and social justice. On the other hand, he was a ruthless dictator who did not hesitate to use violence and repression to achieve his goals. Lenin's ideas, enshrined in the ideology of Marxism-Leninism, would go on to inspire revolutionary movements and regimes across the globe, from Cuba to Vietnam to China. His vision of a socialist utopia, however, proved elusive. The Soviet Union, under Stalin's brutal rule, devolved into a totalitarian state characterized by mass terror, forced collectivization, and a cult of personality. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked the end of the communist experiment that Lenin had begun, leaving behind a legacy of both hope and disillusionment.